Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa for your latest news across the continent. I'm Jaimil Jameen, and these are your headlines. African nations brace for severe tariffs by the Trump administration, set to be imposed this Friday, August 1st. We'll be looking at some of the hardest hit nations by Washington's policies as export markets prepare. Then Spanish football giants Barcelona sign a €44 million sponsorship deal with DR Congo, placing the logo Heart of Africa on training shirts. Critics slam the move amidst local football struggles and ongoing conflict, but officials call it a global rebranding push. And hospitals in Nigeria's capital are in chaos as nurses walk off the job in a week-long strike over pay. It's the latest fallout from economic reforms that doubled wages but sent living costs soaring. The African nation of Lesotho, the small mountainous kingdom surrounded entirely by South Africa, once punched above its weight as the denim capital of Africa. But that reputation is unraveling fast. In April, Donald Trump slapped the country with shock 50% tariffs, sending factories into freefall. Though those tariffs were paused, the uncertainty has been devastating. Thousands are already out of work, and with the pause set to expire this Friday, Lesotho and other African nations are bracing for what comes next. Brian Quinn reports.
A vast clothing factory silent, its long rows of sewing machines idled. This is the state of Lesotho's once bustling textiles industry, its former workers suffering as their livelihoods disappear.
Life has been difficult ever since I was laid off from my job. My husband is also struggling to find work.
A mountainous kingdom roughly the size of Belgium set within South Africa, Lesotho's relative obscurity on the global stage earned it mockery from Donald Trump at his first State of the Union address.
In the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of.
The president, though, did remember it in his so-called reciprocal tariffs announced in April, targeting Lesotho with 50% import taxes, the highest rate of any country on his list. Those tariffs were quickly put on pause, but 10% global tariffs remain. Since 2000, Lesotho had enjoyed duty-free exports to the U.S. under the African Growth and Opportunities Act, or AGOA, aimed at reducing poverty on the continent via trade links instead of aid packages. The law made it possible for Lesotho's textile industry to boom. Until recently, the sector accounted for 90% of manufacturing exports and 40,000 jobs. Lesotho factories have even produced Trump-branded sportswear. Officials say new tariffs will only make it harder for them to reduce the country's trade imbalance with the U.S.
They are inevitably going to make it difficult for us to get foreign exchange that we can use to buy more stuff from the U.S.
Trump, too, says his policy towards Africa will be trade, not aid, but African leaders are skeptical. The AGOA is set to expire in September, with no indication that it will be renewed.
Helping us unpack the effect of the impending Trump tariffs, not only on Lesotho, but on the African continent at large. I'm joined now from Johannesburg by Chief Economist Dr. Lumkile Mondi, Professor at Wits University School of Economics and Business Sciences. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. We just saw in that report the effect of AGOA and the African Growth and Opportunities Act, Trump's administration effectively obliterating the benefits of the act. Just speak to us on how damaging these tariffs will be and which countries are going to be hardest hit given their reliance on the US market.
First, it is very disappointing for the African continent as a whole, given that we always believe that the North is a mirror of what will be at some time in the future, that there'll be convergence as Africa reemerges this century and plays its part that is long overdue. So this African Renaissance, again, is being undermined by basically President Trump pulling the rug under African feet, and in doing so, pushing millions of Africans to poverty, and many of them not being able to achieve their sustainable developmental goals. And therefore, this is really a tragedy for Africa. But I think in Southern Africa, the biggest pressure is going to be in Southern Africa's biggest economy, South Africa, because of its diversification. More Southern Africans are going to move into South Africa, putting more strain into an economy that has also been destroyed by corruption and power cuts, as well as failing infrastructure.
These are countries that you're referring to. I mean, Lesotho is going to be charged 50%, South Africa 30%, Botswana 37%, even Mauritius at 40%. So a lot of the focus, Angola 32% as well, a lot of the focus on these Southern African countries. How do they go about mitigating the risk of these tariffs now, especially given the industries which are going to be hardest hit?
So the first thing that they've done very, very well is that they've sat in the boardroom. They've tried to negotiate despite President Trump and his team pushing back. So it's very important for them to really remain focused on negotiation, because diplomacy is very critical in the global space. Secondly, as indicated by Mr. Shilile in the earlier presentation that you've just shown, is that many of them are going to find it very, very difficult to import many important inputs from the rest of the world, because their foreign currency is going to dwindle. Thirdly, which is very, very important, is that there's opportunities domestically. For example, many countries were exporting clothing like Lesotho. There's a huge opportunity in focusing on intra-Africa trade and seeing where are markets in the African continent whereby many countries can trade among each other. So I think this positively could be a huge boost for speeding up the process of African integration, speeding up the trade among nations within the African continent, and therefore really pivot Africa to a different position. So I'm hoping that leaders are seeing an opportunity whilst we're losing a lot from American market. But I think it's an opportunity for us to really strengthen domestic economies, improve inter-Africa trade, and therefore in doing so, work very, very hard towards the Africa want of 2063, which is very important for us, because we think by that time we'll have much more faster growth, driven by a young population in Africa, driven by investment in infrastructure, integrating, but also hopefully better leaders who care for their people than living large by living on imported goods, as we've seen in many African countries.
Dr. Mondi, just a quick fast question to end off. The US is not imposing tariffs in South Africa on items like chrome and gold, these platinum precious metals. Isn't that a bit hypocritical, because it just seems to be benefiting from that?
Absolutely. We shouldn't be surprised, because we know that the very same president has been moving very slowly in relation to Russia, given that they import quite a lot of uranium from Russia to power many nuclear plants in the US. So therefore, selfishly being who they are, and also playing a very dangerous game in terms of pushing forward and playing that diplomatic role, which the Second World War settlement believed that you could do, working together diplomatically, having institutions that help one another, and those that are successful bring those that are not successful. And in this regard, I think Trump is being very, very selfish and putting America first at the expense of pushing millions, if not billions, within the world who are now going to be losing jobs because of the tariff approach that the president of the US has undertaken.
Dr. Lumkile Mundi, thank you so much for just providing your thoughts. That Friday deadline very much approaching as we speak. That's where we move to the next story. Barcelona, the football club in Spain, has struck a bold new €44 million sponsorship deal with the DR Congo, putting DR Congo, heart of Africa, on the back of training shirts for the next 4 years. The deal includes youth sports camps and a cultural exhibition at the Camp Nou, but it's also sparking backlash at home, where critics slam the government for spending big abroad while local football is starved of funding and conflict rages in the east. Officials defend the move as a global PR push to rebrand DR Congo as a tourism and investment hub. Take a listen.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has started dipping into the world of sports diplomacy in order to advance its goals. The government has signed a sponsorship deal with FC Barcelona, whose training jerseys will now be emblazoned with the slogan RDC Cœur de l'Afrique, which means in French DRC, Heart of Africa. For years, Congo has been seeking diplomatic support against its smaller neighbour, Rwanda, which backs M23 rebels in eastern Congo. The Congolese sponsorship deal appears to be a direct response to Rwanda, which itself sponsors Arsenal as well as Paris Saint-Germain football clubs. According to the 4-year deal, FC Barcelona's stadium will host an exhibition showcasing Congo's cultural diversity and sporting history. There will also be a training camp for 50 Congolese players. But inside of Congo, reception to the deal has been mixed. Although the cost hasn't been made public, some reports suggest that the government could have paid up to $50 million. It's a large sum in a country like Congo, which is one of the poorest in the world. The country is also football mad, and many locals have said that they would have preferred to see the money invested in Congo's under-financed football league.
Now, in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, nurses have launched a 7-day strike over pay and working conditions, deepening the city's healthcare crisis. Talks with the government collapsed, prompting walkouts that have crippled hospitals. The strike follows a wave of unrest over rising living costs after President Bola Tinubu's economic reforms. While the government plans to meet union reps, frustration grows amongst patients and healthcare workers alike. Laurent Berstecker reports.
Lying in a packed ward in Abuja's National Hospital, Obina Nengu absently massages his injured leg. The patient, who was the victim of an accident, has been waiting all day to talk to a nurse, and his frustration is beginning to show.
I'm in very serious pain. Nobody to attend to me. In fact, I don't know where the help will come from, but I pray, may God help me to survive on this situation that I'm seeing now.
All around the hospital, corridors and workstations were deserted as thousands of Nigerian nurses embarked on a week-long strike on Wednesday. They were denouncing a lack of support for the healthcare sector, with constant staff shortages forcing them to work longer hours for little compensation. Nigeria's nurses union says it's long alerted to the situation, and after giving a 2-week ultimatum which was ignored by the government, it's now decided to go on strike for the first time in 40 years.
We have suffered enough. We have suffered a lot. Nobody wants to reckon with what nurses are going through. So we are grossly understaffed. The shortage is enormous.
The strike is set to last an entire week and could be extended further if the Nigerian government fails to meet the nurses' demands.
Finally, in South Africa, scientists in collaboration with the University of Witwatersrand are using a bold new tool in the war on rhino poaching: radioactivity. At a reserve in Limpopo, rhinos are being sedated and injected with small, non-harmful radioactive isotopes directly into their horns. The goal, to make smuggled horns instantly detectable by radiation scanners at airports and ports, the same ones used to catch nuclear contraband. Researchers say the treatment is safe, needs to be done only once every 5 years, and could save rhino owners money in the long run.
Whilst dehorning needs to be done every 18 to 24 months, this only needs to be done every 5 years. And also, because the procedure is so quick and simple, firstly, the animal is under less stress and duress. Secondly, it actually costs much less in terms of veterinary costs and drugs.
That's all the news across the continent for now. There's more coming up on France 24.